The woman's voice sliced through the cozy ambience of Delilah's boutique like a knife, its sharpness echoing off the polished marble floors and pristine glass displays. "She doesn't belong here," she hissed, her manicured finger pointing accusingly at the teenage girl browsing the elegant racks. Customers exchanged uneasy glances, their murmured conversations halting as tension filled the air. But Rachel Thompson, all of 17 and brimming with enthusiasm, wasn't rattled. Her heart thudded in her chest, but her gaze remained steady, locked on the woman who was now openly scorning her existence. Rachel had walked into boutique alone for the first time, her fingers itching with excitement to pick out something special for her high school's annual charity gala. The store had always been a vision of elegance and luxury, a place she'd admired from afar. And today, Rachel finally had the courage to step inside, without her father's guiding presence. But not everyone shared her sense of innocent joy. Mrs. Beverly Carter, a regular customer well known for her air of entitlement, watched Rachel with disdain. Her icy glare followed the girl's every move, her expression twisted in suspicion. To her, Rachel was an unwelcome intruder, someone who dared to step into a world she clearly didn't deserve. And Beverly was determined to make sure Rachel knew it. As Rachel reached for a dress on display, her fingers trembling with both eagerness and nerves, the woman's voice lashed out again, this time louder, more scathing. "I've been watching her. She's not here to buy anything. People like her never are." The words dripped with venom, poisoning the serene elegance of the boutique. But even then, Rachel refused to lower her head. Rachel's pulse quickened, but she kept her shoulders squared and her chin high. Years of being her father's daughter had taught her to never let people's harsh judgments define her. Her dad, Matthew Thompson, was a respected entrepreneur who had built his retail empire from nothing but hard work and relentless determination. And while he often insisted on accompanying her to upscale stores like Delilah's boutique, today Rachel wanted to shop on her own, to feel independent, to prove to herself that she could belong in these spaces just like anyone else. But the woman's words had stung, not because Rachel believed them, but because they were meant to make her feel small, unworthy. The cruelty of it scratched at her chest, but she buried the pain under layers of resilience. She glanced around the boutique, her gaze brushing over elegant dresses and polished accessories. The same thing she dreamed of trying on for weeks. "Is there something you need?" Rachel asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil swirling inside her. Her words were simple, but her tone carried a weight that spoke of dignity and strength. The woman blinked, momentarily startled by Rachel's unwavering response. But Beverly's mouth curled into a sneer, her scorn undeterred. "I just find it hard to believe someone like you is really here to shop," Beverly shot back, her tone soaked in condescension. Rachel inhaled deeply, refusing to be rattled. "Well, I guess my purchases will speak for themselves," she replied, her voice calm and unyielding. The boutique was quiet now, every eye in the room focused on the brewing confrontation. And despite the fear that threatened to bloom within her, Rachel held her ground. Beverly's expression twisted with smug satisfaction as she glared at Rachel, her sharp gaze as piercing as icicles. To her, Rachel was nothing more than an imposter playing dress-up in a world meant only for the wealthy and well-connected. And Beverly was determined to make sure Rachel felt every ounce of that exclusion. "Honestly, sweetheart, maybe you should try somewhere more suited to your kind," Beverly sneered, her words slick with condescension. "This store isn't exactly Target." Rachel's lips twitched, amusement mingling with frustration. She might have been young, but she wasn't naive. And while Beverly's blatant prejudice burned hot and unforgiving, Rachel couldn't help but find the woman's desperate attempt to assert her dominance somewhat pathetic. "Well," Rachel said, feigning contemplation as her fingers trailed along the delicate beading of an elegant sapphire gown, "I suppose you're right. The stores I usually go to are much nicer than this." Beverly's jaw clenched. Her eyes narrowed as if trying to dissect the girl's words, searching for the hidden insult that was definitely there. "Oh, please," Beverly snapped, her cheeks reddening. "We all know you're just here to loiter. Probably just waiting for a chance to pocket something." Rachel felt her temper flare, but she reeled it in, holding herself steady. She wouldn't give Beverly the satisfaction of seeing her break. Maybe you should focus more on your shopping and less on harassing someone who's done nothing to you, Rachel replied coolly. A few nearby customers exchanged glances, their unease evident. But even amid the heavy atmosphere, a faint smile played on Rachel's lips. Beverly might have been trying to humiliate her, but Rachel wasn't about to back down. Not now. Not ever. Rachel's patience was wearing thin. It was one thing to endure Beverly's haughty remarks, but the woman's obsession with making her feel like a criminal was downright absurd. Still, Rachel kept her chin high, her gaze unwavering. "All right," Rachel said, her voice smooth like honey but sharp enough to cut. "You want to see what's in my bag? Be my guest." She held it out with a flourish, her confidence as crisp as the boutique's air-conditioned chill. The store manager, a frazzled woman named Janet who had only worked there for a few months, approached with an apologetic but visibly nervous expression. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the bag, clearly more concerned about pleasing Beverly than actually resolving the situation. "I'm sure this is all just a misunderstanding," Janet mumbled, her voice cracking under the weight of the uncomfortable scene. Beverly crossed her arms triumphantly, her eyes sparkling with misplaced righteousness. "Oh, there's no misunderstanding. Just a thief trying to blend in where she doesn't belong." Rachel rolled her eyes but kept her composure as Janet inspected her bag. The crowd of onlookers grew thicker, customers pretending to browse while clearly captivated by the unfolding drama. "Well," Beverly's voice was an impatient bark. "Find anything?" Janet's cheeks flushed pink as she glanced up at Rachel, shaking her head. "No, nothing here. Everything looks perfectly fine." Rachel's smirk was small but victorious. "Told you," she said with a shrug, her calmness only infuriating Beverly more. But Beverly's anger was far from extinguished. "Check again," she snapped. "Girls like her are sneaky. She probably hid something elsewhere." Rachel's gaze hardened. This woman's arrogance was beyond belief. And if she thought Rachel was going to let her win, she was in for a very rude awakening. Rachel's patience was hanging by a thread, but she refused to lose her cool. The audience of curious shoppers now resembled spectators at some impromptu drama production, their eyes flicking between Rachel and Beverly like they were waiting for a grand climax. "Check again? Really?" Rachel scoffed, folding her arms. "Unless you think I'm hiding a designer dress in my pockets, maybe it's time you realize you're embarrassing yourself." Beverly's face twisted into a scowl. "You've got a lot of nerve for someone who's clearly out of her element." "Out of my element?" Rachel's laugh was light, almost casual. "Lady, I've been shopping at places twice as expensive as this since I was 12. But sure, let's pretend this little boutique is the height of luxury." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even Janet's eyes widened as she glanced nervously between the two. But it was clear Beverly's anger wasn't cooling off any time soon. "Young lady," Beverly snapped, her voice growing shrill. "You may have fooled the manager, but I'm not falling for it. People like you." "People like me?" Rachel cut her off, raising an eyebrow. "You mean confident, stylish, and not afraid to call out someone's nonsense when they see it?" Somewhere behind them, a teenage boy who had been pretending to admire a display of purses let out a snort of laughter. His mother quickly pulled him away, but the damage was done. Rachel took a step closer, her gaze sharp and unyielding. "Maybe you should spend more time worrying about your own wardrobe than someone else's, Mrs. Carter. It's not a good look trying to bully someone you don't even know." The crowd murmured in agreement. For the first time, Beverly's armor of superiority seemed to crack. Beverly's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The composure she wore like an overpriced coat was slipping, and Rachel could see the cracks forming in the woman's icy demeanor. But instead of stopping, Beverly pressed forward, her desperation making her words come out sharper, nastier. "If you have nothing to hide," Beverly sneered, her voice rising in pitch, "then why are you being so defensive?" Guilty people always try to twist things around. Rachel let out a slow, disbelieving chuckle. "Defensive? Lady, you've been hounding me like a bloodhound since I walked in the door. You accused me of stealing, had my bag searched, and still refuse to accept the truth. I think the only guilty one here is you. Guilty of being a miserable, judgmental busybody." The crowd chuckled, a few people even nodding in agreement. Beverly's cheeks flushed crimson, her anger replaced with a flicker of embarrassment. But Beverly wasn't about to be humiliated in her favorite boutique. She turned her wrath toward Janet, the nervous manager. "Are you just going to stand there?" she barked. "This girl is clearly trying to cause trouble. Just ask her to leave." Janet swallowed hard, her gaze darting between Rachel and Beverly like a deer caught between two speeding cars. "I think maybe it's best if you just leave," she said, her words weak and unconvincing. Rachel's jaw clenched, the betrayal stinging like salt in a wound. She had done nothing wrong. Yet somehow, this woman's twisted reality was being accepted as truth. But if Beverly thought Rachel was about to back down, she was sorely mistaken. Rachel's eyes locked on Janet. "You're seriously kicking me out because of her?" she asked, her voice calm but cold. "Even after proving I've done nothing wrong?" Janet's guilty expression was all the answer Rachel needed. And just like that, the fire in Rachel's chest ignited brighter than ever. Rachel's chest tightened as she looked around the boutique, her frustration simmering beneath her calm exterior. If they wanted to believe Beverly's nonsense, fine. But she wasn't about to stand there and be humiliated. Not by a woman clinging to her own self-importance like a lifeline. "You know what?" Rachel said, her voice cool and controlled. "If you're all so determined to kick me out, maybe I should call someone who actually knows what they're doing, like the owner of the store." Beverly's laugh was a sharp, ugly sound. "Oh, please. Like you know anyone important enough to make a difference. Just leave before you embarrass yourself any more than you already have." Rachel didn't bother to respond. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, her finger steady as she dialed a familiar number. The line clicked almost instantly, and her father's deep, reassuring voice filled her ear. "Hey, Dad," Rachel said, her tone casual despite the tension swirling around her. "You wouldn't happen to be near Delilah's boutique, would you?" Matthew Thompson's voice sharpened with concern. "Is everything all right, honey?" "Not exactly," Rachel replied, her eyes never leaving Beverly's increasingly flustered face. "Seems like there's a misunderstanding here. Apparently, I don't belong in this store, and the manager's asking me to leave." There was a heavy pause on the other end of the line before her father's response came through, crisp and full of authority. "Stay right where you are. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Rachel ended the call and slipped her phone back into her pocket, her expression calm but unwavering. "Now," she said, her gaze locking onto Beverly's scowling face. "Let's see how this little misunderstanding gets sorted out." Beverly's eyes narrowed as Rachel calmly slipped her phone back into her pocket, her posture radiating defiance. The other customers exchanged curious glances, the boutique's elegant atmosphere now sizzling with tension and anticipation. "Oh, honey," Beverly sneered, her words dripping with scorn. "You really think some desperate little phone call is going to change anything? Honestly, you're just making a fool of yourself." Rachel's smile was cool, almost amused. "I guess we'll see, won't we?" The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. Beverly shifted her weight from one stiletto-clad foot to the other, her irritation practically radiating off her like heat waves. Janet, the manager, looked like she wanted to shrink into the nearest clothes rack and disappear entirely. Then, the low rumble of a powerful engine vibrated through the boutique's glass doors. Heads turned as a sleek, jet-black SUV rolled up to the curb, its glossy exterior glinting under the midday sun. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out, his tailored suit clinging perfectly to his athletic frame. Matthew Thompson's eyes were cold steel as he strode toward the boutique with the confidence of a man used to commanding boardrooms and making million-dollar deals before lunch. He pushed open the door, the soft chime almost drowned by the audible gasp that rippled through the crowd. Even Janet straightened, her eyes going wide with recognition. "Mr. Thompson," Janet stammered, her voice trembling as if the air had suddenly become too heavy to breathe. But Matthew ignored her. His gaze zeroed in on Rachel, standing in the middle of the boutique like she owned the place. And, in a way, she did. "Now," Matthew said, his voice a low rumble that silenced every whisper in the room. "Would someone like to explain to me what the hell is going on here?" Matthew's presence was like a tidal wave crashing through the boutique. sweeping away the petty cruelty and doubt that had been building for the past hour. The air was thick with tension as he stood, his gaze cutting through the room until it settled firmly on Beverly. "Would you care to explain why you've been harassing my daughter?" Matthew's voice was calm, but there was a dangerous edge to it, like a blade wrapped in silk. Beverly's smugness evaporated instantly, her face paling to a sickly shade. "Why, your daughter," she stammered, the words stumbling over her tongue like broken glass. "I didn't realize." "That's exactly the problem, isn't it?" Matthew interrupted, his eyes sharp and unyielding. "You assumed. You judged her before knowing anything about her. And now you've made a fool of yourself." Beverly opened and closed her mouth, her confidence crumbling under Matthew's unforgiving gaze. Customers murmured quietly, their gazes burning holes through Beverly's manufactured superiority. She was acting suspiciously. Beverly tried, her voice brittle and desperate. "I was only trying to protect the store's reputation." Matthew's expression remained stoic. Protect the store's reputation by targeting an innocent girl and accusing her without evidence? It sounds more like you were trying to protect your own ego. Rachel watched her father with admiration, her earlier anger slowly melting into gratitude. He was right. This wasn't just about proving her innocence. It was about challenging the poison of prejudice that some people wore like a badge of honor. Matthew's voice softened only slightly as he spoke to the gathered crowd. "Judging people without understanding them only reveals your own insecurities. Respect should be a right, not a privilege reserved for a select few." The room fell silent, his words echoing louder than any of Beverly's accusations. Beverly's shoulders sagged under the weight of Matthew's words, her arrogance now nothing but pathetic shadow of itself. The other customers stared at her, judgment clear in their eyes. Some even murmured their agreement with Matthew's sentiment, their whispers cutting through the silence like knives. Matthew's gaze shifted to Janet, the store manager, who looked as though she might collapse from sheer embarrassment. "And you," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. "Why did you stand by and let this happen? Why didn't you question the baseless accusations thrown at my daughter?" Janet's eyes darted to the floor. "I was just trying to keep the peace," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't know how to handle the situation." "Keeping the peace doesn't mean letting someone be bullied or humiliated," Matthew replied, his voice calm but resolute. "Leadership means standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. It means having the courage to protect those who are unfairly targeted, not just trying to appease whoever shouts the loudest." The lesson hit the room like a thunderclap. It was as if Matthew's words had reached something deeper than anger. They reached a place of truth that couldn't be ignored. He looked around the room, his gaze settling on each face before landing back on Beverly. "Everyone deserves to be treated with respect. My daughter shouldn't have to justify her presence here to anyone. And the fact that she does shows how much work we still have to do as a society." Turning to Rachel, his expression softened. "You did well, Rachel. You stood up for yourself with grace and dignity. I couldn't be prouder." Rachel's lips curled into a small but genuine smile. The lesson wasn't just for Beverly or Janet. It was for everyone, herself included.